with Lane Kiffin leaving, Joe, there obviously was a situation. And I'm sure with those Ole Miss thing, we can talk about how this all played out. We really didn't do it from the LSU side of things. But with all the things that played out into last night and into today, Ole Miss is promoting Pete Golding, ironically a Hammond, Louisiana native, to be their head coach. They've been trying to keep a lot of their offensive staff in place, but they have promoted Pete Golding. Joe, let's talk about some of the things that have been happening over the last couple of days, and then them promoting into into Pete Golding as their new head coach.
I think that, first of all, that this decision to go with Pete Golding is the one that you had to make. It was incredibly chaotic what was transpiring. There were these threats that were essentially a part of this decision of him bringing a lot of his staff, of him potentially bringing, players sitting out and maybe transferring quickly and not participating if Lane Kiffin didn't get to coach during the playoff. So far, that hasn't really come to fruition. It seems like a lot of guys are sticking around.
They're not.
What do you mean?
He's taking the entire damn near the entire offensive staff.
Which is to this point why keeping Golding around is stopping the bleeding as much as you possibly can. I'm curious to see what happens with most of this roster, and if all of them decide, like, hey, I want to go play. If some of them are checked out and they say, oh, I came here for Kiffin, I didn't come here to play for Ole Miss. I'm really curious to see what happens over the next couple of days. I think that it's a little risky, though, to jump immediately to Golding. Golding does not have head coaching experience. He's not somebody who's been brought up in coaching circles as somebody who is the next great head coach. He's been deemed a great defensive mind who's been incredibly inconsistent. If he can capture a little bit of momentum and energy from this team, let's see what they can do during the playoff. Let's see what they can do next year. But at the same time, somebody who's not even the best available candidate for you to go on and pursue, did they strike out with Summerall? Did they completely strike out with Golesh? And did they just think that this was their best possible option?
So I don't know what else they could have done. Now, last Wednesday, Ole Miss officials, and I'm not guessing, flew into New Orleans to try to talk to John Summerall. Now, we know that John Summerall ultimately took the job at Florida. I'm not guessing. This isn't what somebody told me. I know for a fact that happened, and they missed. And I think that some of the indecisions by them, I think some of the indecisions in reference to not giving and sticking to the ultimatum led you to this situation. Now, I do think that Pete Golding would have been a head coach by now if some of the situations at Alabama did not happen. I'm not going to talk about what happened. We all know what happened there. And I think he would have been one. Pete is a hell of a recruiter. He's a hell of a developer. He's a hell of a coach. Joe, I think this actually might work because I get that you got to really replace the offensive side of things. But Pete was a big deal when it came to this recruiting process and getting the guys in there. What's their level of work, though? Like, what is their level of success for Pete Golding will be my question. I don't know how this playoff game is going to go for him, and we will talk about that when it happens. But it's very apparent to me that when the players found out, they were cool with it. And a lot of people thought that the interim would have been Joe Judge, who was the former New York Giants head coach. They quickly moved to Pete Golding. I don't hate the hire based off of everything that went on, and it's kind of a low-risk, high-reward because you can move off for him in a year if you need to. You just got to buy out from LSU. You are going to be in a situation where if it doesn't work out, you can kind of Zach Arnett this thing in a little bit of a ways, but you got to let him build. You got to let him, if you think that he's your guy, you got to give him more than a one-year chance. I think Pete could do, if they give him the opportunity, can do and have a really good chance here to do good things at Ole Miss. But they're crippled right now. Lane Kiffin walking out that door, Charlie Weiss walking out that door, and I know that they don't want to hear this. It's a big deal because I know that Pete did a lot of the things. And listen, who's to say that this doesn't piss off Ole Miss fans to a high regard where you don't get to a situation where, Joe, the fan base and the booster base doesn't want to spend a shitload of money to continue to pursue this thing. Pete Golding's been one of, and it is one of the best defensive minds in the sport. He's been with Nick. He's been with Lane. He's had multiple top 15, multiple top 10 total defenses. Look what he did with this defense, and everybody thought it was a rebuilding year. They're a top 30 unit for what it's worth. I like Pete. I've known Pete for a long time, since us being from the same place and him starting off in his days at Southeastern. I think that if you give him time, it will work. I just don't know if they'll give him enough time. And he's going to recruit, and he's going to really recruit inside the state of Mississippi. And be honest with you, I think Lane and them need to be a little cautious now that Lane's moving on to Ole Miss in reference to the high school recruiting side of this. It's going to all come down to what do they do on the offensive side of things. That's where the massive hit is. Yeah. You can't replace a Lane Kiffin. And look, you hate him right now, Ole Miss fans. I get it. You just don't simply replace him unless you go knock this out of the park, which, Joe, we don't know if they're going to be able to do.
Ultimately, in the playoff, I'm not really threatened by them. On FanDuel, they have plus 2,500 odds to win the national championship. I wouldn't touch that. I think, to your point, even if you're only losing Charlie Weiss Jr. and you're losing Lane Kiffin, that is a much bigger hit than I think people are willing to realize and to admit.
Quick update. They've lost their wide receivers coach. They've lost their inside receivers coach. They've lost their GM. Joe, I know, their offensive line coach seems to be staying, but they're losing a lot of off-field personnel too. Like it's not great. Like, these guys were on the plane with Lane. Like, I'm looking at the video right now of Charlie Weiss and McDonald and all these dudes right now get off the plane. So, Joe, they're crippled offensively.
We also don't know who maybe potentially decides to get on tomorrow. We'll see what happens here.
Right.
I do want to just say I do agree with the way that you frame this. I think that when you're in this position, it's pretty low risk to go to Golding. You mentioned he's a great recruiter. If this is an absolute mess and he's not meant to do it, and they go 6-6 or something next year, you fire him, and then you're going to be one of the better jobs next head coaching cycle, instead of trying to jump into a race that was already had limited options. We're going to talk about a little bit later how some of these teams seemingly compromised because they didn't have the opportunity to pursue some of these coaches that took massive extensions to stick where they were.
Mm-hmm.
I think that doing this is probably the safer choice. And there is a world for Ole Miss to become a steady, consistent, quality program in the SEC under Pete Golding. But the thing is, I think that success is much different than it was under Kiffin. I think that they're more likely going to be 8-4, 9-3, and there's a chance they maybe ascend further than that. But when you're hiring a guy who's never been a head coach, it's going to be a little bit of a growing process, as you talked about. If there's positive signs, I agree with you. Give him a chance to grow.
Well, here's
go ahead. No, go ahead. Okay. I was going to say at the end.
No.
You go. At the end of the day, this is really effing stupid that this whole thing became so contentious that Lane can't coach in the playoff game. I don't agree whatsoever with people that have put out these takes that have said, oh, it's like divorcing your wife and then showing up at asking if you can stay through the holidays. I don't think it's similar whatsoever. Is that a funny way of putting it? Absolutely. But it's not the same thing. It is completely 1,000% different. You have an opportunity to capitalize on a season that has been incredibly memorable for you. You're not going to win a national championship probably this year with all the distractions, but let the guy finish. Why did it have to get to this point? Why did it have to get to this point where you straight up said no to him, and you knew damn well that Lane Kiffin, how difficult of a personality as he is, and Lane is not removed from having any faults in this, by the way. I think that there's an argument to be had that he also equally mishandled this by getting as aggressive as he did in responding. But if you're Ole Miss, Why would you let it get to this point? Why wouldn't you just let him finish and then figure it out from there? You could have ended up promoting Pete Golding after the fact if that was the decision that you were going to go with. I just think that it's so stupid and stubborn, especially when we see that Eric Morris and also John Summerall are going to be coaching in their conference championship game and likely will be coaching during the college football playoff. It is an absolute dumb, visceral, just panicked, pissed off, emotional reaction, and I absolutely hate it.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, listen, they would say, because trust me, I've been arguing with them all day or last 2 days. Mm-hmm. Keith Carter, listen, Ole Miss fans are about to get super pissed, but they need to hear this. Keith Carter, their AD, massively mismanaged this situation.
Yes.
Massively. Why is everybody else able to do it? Now, they will say, well, you can't do it to another SEC team. But Lane Kiffin said that we put guardrails in place. There were guardrails in place. I'm assuming some of those guardrails would have been him leaving the facility as soon as practice was over, not being a part of anything, but wanting to coach this team. Everybody keeps trying to convince me that Lane Kiffin hasn't changed. And there's a lot of dirty laundry that's coming out. I understand it. Trust me. As someone who's been a part of 3 head coaches being fired, trust me, I get it. The bottom line is that you had a chance to go and win a national title and go into the playoff, and you're not going to do it. This could have been your most successful year that Lane Kiffin led you to. They have a tough time right now swallowing the pill that their biggest football rival went in their trap and dominated their trap. LSU lost to them this season, and it didn't matter. It didn't matter. It just didn't matter. They're going to have to get over the fact that LSU is a top 3 job. What do you want Lane Kiffin to do? You're blaming Lane Kiffin for an NCAA calendar problem. What do you want him to do? If anything that has told me this coaching carousel, National Signing Day, needs to go back to February. If kids want to early enroll, you already make them have an exemption to early enroll. Let them do it. Newsflash, Peter Pan. The portal, I know Kirby, like guys like Kirby say, we want the portal to be in December so we know what we have in spring. It doesn't work like that. It can't work like that. You got to go to the NFL model and move that back. Somebody, again, and Joe, me and you talked about this last week. What did you want Lane Kiffin to do? There's 1,300 people in this chat right now.
Yeah.
What do you want Lane Kiffin to do? Because I have not heard a good argument.
Okay. Again, I really don't think that he is safe from any fault with this. I think that both sides are acting like children. I think it's the result of both sides acting the way that they did. If both sides handled this more professionally, it would have been quite simple. Lane asks, I want to stay. Ole Miss says, no, I'm sorry, I don't think that we want to do that, which is a wrong choice by then. Lane just needed to have left. That's the problem. The fact that he is doing this and he's acting so vindictively of doing the whole, which it was rumored, and it's kind of been proof based on the fact that we see all these guys getting on the plane or getting off the plane rather, that he threatened them by saying, I'm going to take everybody with me. I'm going to make this absolute a living hell for you. I think that part of it didn't need to happen. If you intended to leave, and this is a decision that you have been nearly close to making for some time, he should have just made it sooner. And it felt like the reason why it got dragged out is because he wanted to fight tooth and nail to coach during the playoff. The minute that you heard no, you should not have been this stubborn. That's my only pause with this. And I don't disagree, but I don't disagree with you.
Suspend him. Suspend him. You're making Lane Kiffin. Hold on. You're telling Lane Kiffin to make the decision that he doesn't want to make, and you want him to be the bigger person when you don't have.
No. I'm not saying tell him to make a decision.
Not you. Keith Carter's got to suspend him then. Grow a pair of nuts. You let this drag on too long. Again, he wants to go to the better institution while finishing something that he built. I don't understand what's wrong with that.
I don't think that there's anything wrong with the premise, and I completely agree with you. I'm on your side. I think that Lane is not in the wrong to believe, hey, I took us this far. It took 6 years to get to this point. This is the best season you've ever had, I've ever had as a coach. Why are you robbing me of this opportunity and you of this opportunity? It is, as I said, vindictive of Ole Miss. But the problem is that Lane didn't need to respond the way that he did. I know that I'm asking him to be the bigger person, but what's wrong with that? Seriously, but both sides need to be brought up of being at fault in this situation. But I think it comes to a certain point that you just got to step away. You have to step away. Both sides needed to be more amicable about this and completely step away. This was so unnecessary, and this is arguably going to continue to be one of the most ridiculous outcomes of a coaching departure that we're ever going to see. Because both sides took it personally. And it didn't need to be personal. It absolutely did not need to be personal. That's my bit with this. I think that this was all incredibly avoidable.
Oh, it could have been avoidable. Suspend him. You're paid a lot of money to make decisions. Ole Miss
didn't want to look like the bad guy. They didn't want to look like the bad guy.
Well, they're definitely trying to paint him as the villain now. I mean, you've
done it successfully.
Ole Miss was trying to win a PR game without actually being a grown-up. Listen, Joe, what would you and I do if you and I had an employee who wanted to finish through the football season with us, but wanted to go to a quote-unquote bigger show? What would we do?
But we're not
Hold on. What would we do?
I don't still think that's comparable, but we'd obviously let them. We would let them finish.
No, we wouldn't.
I would let them finish. I quite literally did this.
I hope all ladies will let us finish. But I mean, it just gets to a point in time where that either, and if we didn't like the person they would go to, we would tell them to walk. Like, hey man, you can't come back here.
I quite literally did this when I quit my job as the producer for the College Football Inquirer last year. I had made the decision that I wanted to pursue this full time because it was turning into something massive, hence the fact that we've got 1,300 people here watching this show, which is double the most that we've ever had in a live show. I told my boss I want to finish the season, but I'm letting you know that I'm leaving. And it was a month, and he said, yeah. He said, no problem. Because he understood that would have been a mess trying to transition away from me, and it was best for me to get the opportunity to finish things up with the guys that I built a relationship with. I think that this is my whole point. Most professional situations don't act as childish as Clark did and as Lane Kiffin did. I think that this was all avoidable. It is on Ole Miss, but it is also equally on Lane. I don't think that either side is absolved of any blame.
I don't completely disagree with that. All right.